Welcome to another Figure Week, Hard Surface Week, Organic Week.
Hey guys, welcome back to Digital Artcast and another episode coming fast and furious at you from the interwebs. Whatever you guys are doing right now, I hope you're staying safe and focusing on any projects to keep you sane while the pandemic roams the earth at the moment. Again, today, another great guest, someone that I've wanted to have on the podcast for a couple of weeks now, and we're finally nailed down a day that we can talk after much back and forth. But if you can welcome along today's guest, it's with Laura Gallagher. Hey Laura.
Hey guys.
Hey, and also using the video version as well, so you can see her lovely face. So yeah,
cool. Well, thanks for the invite. It's good to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for coming on and giving up your time. I know you're hella busy running your own thing, doing your entrepreneurship that you do so well. But yeah, so your artwork and your company Outgang came to my attention through a mutual friend, and yeah, it was interesting to see what you're doing, because again, when it comes to, I think specifically character schools and 3D character schools, there aren't many. I could maybe even count on one hand the amount of people who actually do that kind of full time. So yeah, I mean, we could dive into your backstory and all the rest of the stuff, but for people who don't know you, could you run just a quick intro, just who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, I've been working in the games industry for about, it's like, I think every time I answer that question, I give a different number. So I guess it's probably good if I start to like say the year, like after like you've been working in the industry for 10 years, it's like at some point you're just like, yeah, it's been like, I don't know, it's been more than like 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like you kind of stop to like count the years there. But
yeah.
I did count the years very religiously before that, because I was like really proud, like, oh, it's been 6 years. It's been 7 years. Oh my God, it's like wonderful. Yeah, so I've been essentially working in the games industry since 2008, actually. That's when I started. Maybe just give you guys a bit of a background. I went to 3D school before that for about a year here in Montreal. So that was 2007. And like things have actually changed quite a lot, because like when I was in school, it was a 1-year program, and then after I left school, the school where I went switched to an actual university, and now like it's a 3-year program, which right. I think probably attracts a very different client base. Like I don't know that I would have necessarily gone to 3D school had it been a 3-year program back then, but I suppose it's a discussion for later there. Yeah, so 3D school, 2007, and then straight into the games industry. Went to work at IDOS Montreal stayed there for about 10 years. Had a chance there to go from a junior all the way up to a lead position. Project I've worked on were Deus Ex, Human Revolution. That was the first one. It was a 5-year program, or 5-year project. It was a really long one. It was super interesting. I met a lot of fantastic people working on that. Then Tomb Raider. Then Deus Ex Mankind Divided, so the sequel to Human Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Stayed there for about 10 years. I worked on another project that was there. The project has not been announced yet, so I can't really talk about that one. And then, then I left that studio, went to work in Amsterdam for about 2 years at Guerrilla Games. And then I came back. So I came back in 2019 to Montreal, which is my hometown. And I pretty much came back and I founded my own company and focusing on education for affordable character art education. That's pretty much it.
That's quite a resume. that's quite an intense set of projects that you've been on. Like Deus Ex as well, I think, which was interesting when we talked about it not too long ago. When because I told you I was a huge Adam Jensen fan. I really loved the fact that you worked on that character. That was a total
Thanks.
fanboy moment for me. I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. And you also were involved in it was a really cool project where a young girl had a prosthetic arm.
That's right. Yeah.
Modeled after Adam's, but you modeled that as well, right?
That's right. Yeah. That was a super interesting project there. Like, like at the heart of Deus Ex, the whole franchise essentially is this idea of transhumanism, right? Like the sort of idea that we can become sort of bigger than ourselves as human beings if we sort of start to sort of transform ourselves through like prosthetics and augmentations and like stuff like that. That's like really, really at the key of the franchise there. And one thing there that was really like a real cornerstone of that when I was working on that franchise there, the art director that we had, that guy was just fantastic to like work with. Like he, I don't know if he knows about this, but like he really transformed my own take on like what art direction is and like how to like approach it and how to really sort of develop an art direction that is really like that really has the word art at its core, but so like for him, like it was really important that not only do we make these kind of augmentations through the game, for like the players to like play with and for like the characters, of course, the whole franchise really sort of revolves around that, but to really also make it fashionable, make it desirable, make it interesting for people, because like truth be told, like now I think that Open Bionics, which is the company that you are referring to, that build these real life prostheses now, like when we're working on Deus Ex, there wasn't really any sort of like fashionable prosthetics, if you see what I mean, sort of out there, like it's like if you had a disability and you needed to have like a something to sort of help you there, whether it's a leg or an like arm or something like that.
Or a limb, yeah.
Yeah. It's like it was pretty much always like sort of replicas of like the real thing in like real life. Like it looks like medical devices. Really, like it's not. There was all no
design to it, no art aesthetic. It was just like mechanics. Yeah,
that's right. And like that was really at the core of Deus Ex as a franchise. Like that was really, really sort of important for us. Like to make like our own virtual versions of prosthetics that are not only essentially something that is there to be functional, but that is also fashionable and sort of desirable, So I don't remember the year, but it was like somewhere like mid 2000s or so. Got contacted by Open Bionics, which like they were essentially developing that, but like for real, like actual real prosthetics that were there to just help people with disabilities and just to make like not only functional stuff, but like really sort of beautiful, desirable prosthetics, So like I think that spoke really to the core of the studio and the values that was pretty much at the heart of that, So that was a great collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, like I think also Deus Ex is like a sleeper where it came out at a time when, I mean, gaming now is so mainstream, especially with stuff like Twitch, where like it's very at the public facing eye, and of course Cyberpunk has come out recently, but Deus Ex was one of the first revolutions of that kind of like hitting the world and especially gaming. And I know this is even going way back when I think it was like the first teaser of the first game, which I think was Human Revolution, came out. I was kind of sitting with intentionally watching that because I played the series when it was like its first iteration on PC back in early 2000s, maybe even late 90s, and for that even the storyline at the time when the first one was interesting because it plays almost parallels to what we're going through now. But like, if if you're OG Deus Ex fans in the house, but yeah, again, I think that whole series is one of the best art directed representations of games in the last 20 years. I think it definitely has roots that will stem for many, many years when people go back and play it. And I think, like you talked about, the art director changed your interpretation of art direction. I think when I watched and played that game, it did hit me as an artist as well as a player. And I think it was a monument to IDOS at the time. And I'm just sad sometimes that people aren't en masse, knowing how amazing that game really is. Even the mechanics for it, like the whole thing we watched where like his vision and breaking through walls and the whole stealth mechanic, like that stuff was just done so well gameplay wise. So it wasn't just aesthetically pleasing, it was also just game wise, it was just incredible to play. So yeah, that must have been an incredible experience, and all those people you got to meet those 10 years you were there. Is that ever something that's kind of like lurking in your heart somewhere at the back that IDOS might be, maybe one day you might venture back into that studio or maybe connect to another project with you guys?
Well, one thing I haven't said to the team there, but that if they do listen to this, guys, if so like you probably know that essentially after Mankind Divided shipped, essentially the franchise got prioritized for like a while there within the studio.
Yeah.
I don't really know what things are sort of going on there right now. Essentially the team won't tell me these kind of things. But
Yeah, of
it's
course,
it's like if people at IDOS Montreal, if you guys are listening to this, if ever or whenever essentially there is a new Deus Ex that happens within your studio, call me because I want to work on that again.
Yeah, it would be interesting as well, I think, because I know there was the kind of standalone DLC that came with one of them at one point that was almost like an extra game, but the third iteration never really hit, and that I think was for me also a bit of a bummer because I felt like the trilogy would have rounded that whole, especially Adam's story and the whole mech thing that was going on and the alterations, like Mankind Divided I think also done really, but Mankind Divided I think also fell into the trap that it came out at a really weird time as well between a lot of games that were I think more mainstream, and it was, I think, because it was quite a niche of a game, and I think it didn't fall into more mainstream stuff at the time. So yeah, but that whole team and that game was definitely for me a crowning achievement. So yeah, pretty awesome that you got to work in that. And then of course, yeah, and now you've done your stint also in the Netherlands working on the Horizon game that's been announced now, the new one. So that would have been great as well, because obviously I hear Guerrilla are a great team to work with as well. So you've done all this stuff, you've had this great career and education, and worked up to a lead and worked in these great projects. So what was the draw to come back and start Outgang? Like, what was the pull that really wanted you to move away again from another project to do your own thing?
Well, when I left Guerrilla Games, I knew I wanted to found my own company, but to be honest, I wasn't really sure what company I wanted to found. That wasn't really clear to me back then, But like, I've been listening, I've been doing a lot of research. I've been really sort of educating myself on the topic of like entrepreneurship and everything that kind of has to do with that, And like, I keep hearing left and right from like different sources or like different mentors in that field, It's like, a lot of people who find their own who found their own companies or really launched themselves in that, they usually do it around their 30s or so. Like that's kind of like a common time, Because if you try to found your own business, if you try to launch yourself in something you want to do there, and you're like within your 40s, like you can certainly do it. Of course, it's like there's nothing that's going to stop you from doing that. But at the same time, it's like, often once you get to your 40s, like people start to become a bit too comfortable with a family, a house, and kids, So like by that time, it's sometime like a bit too late for some people. And when you're like 20, like you often don't really think about that either, because like, well, when I was 20 years old, really, like the only thing I really wanted to do was just to prove myself in the games industry and work on like some cool projects there. And I would not have traded the time I was spending on Deus Ex for anything at all either. So I hate to say it, but like it just felt like the right time for me. It's like, I want to do this. Like I was kind of thinking of my life, right? And I'm like, okay, what are the regrets that I'm going to have when I'm 60 years old? Like what kind of regrets will I have? And one of the regrets I would have had would have been to spend my whole life within the same studio. So as much as I liked IDOS Montreal. That's kind of the reflection that made me say, like, okay, after I had been there for like about a decade there, I was like, yeah, I think once I'm 60, I may regret working in the same studio, because there are people who do that. It's like they spend
Yeah.
their whole career working within the same studio, and there's really nothing wrong with that. And if people want
Yeah.
to do that and they're quite happy, then all the more power to them, right? But I was kind of having that reflection on my whole life, on my own life, and I was like, yeah, I will probably regret this if I don't go and work abroad at some point within my life there. So I kind of wanted to have that sort of experience. So that's why essentially I left where I was in Montreal to go work at Guerrilla Games. And I more or less had the same reflection like 2 years later. And like if I want to create my own company, maybe try that out, see how things go there, I kind of have to do it now. Like now is a good time to like do so. So yeah, like it's kind of like all these kind of reflections upon like what will I regret when I am older that I have had never done within my life, right?
Right.
And yeah, so when I left Guerrilla Games, it really wasn't clear to me yet what exactly I wanted to do as far as a business was concerned, but it was clear to me that I wanted to do a business of some kind. And so I had the privilege of having a bit of a financial cushion there. So when I came back in 2019, I spent about I spent about like 6 months or so just sort of taking a bit of a sabbatical break. Like first of all, I kind of wanted to have that too. After like 12 years working in the games industry, it was kind of important for me to maybe have a bit of a break there. But during those 6 months, I was kind of just those 6 months, I was kind of just enjoying myself, kind of thinking through like, okay, like what kind of business like do I want to do? And it was really important for me that I really sort of come up with a business plan or like a business idea or like something that was really near and dear to me. I knew it was going to be a lot of work. Like it's a whole lot of work to build your own company and stuff. So it was really important for me that I really find something that I believe in. So that I really have the motivation to pull through and really work on this and not just drop out after a few months there. So yeah, it took me about like another 6 months to maybe like put a plan together, kind of think through what kind of business do I want to do, and that's more or less how it came up to the fact that I wanted to really found a company that's really focused on affordable character art education.
I mean, like I think also by luck, it would have been good as well for you because when the pandemic hit, obviously, people were then more indoors. They were learning online more. They were, nobody able to go to traditional schools or anything in the area. But yeah, that probably was a good time also for that to hit, for your channel to kind of grow as well for people watching online content. I mean, for you saying affordable, what do you think was like the major trappings you saw in bigger schools? Was it the prices were just overinflated? I mean, I don't know what the cost for typical schools are across there compared to the UK, but was it just something you saw that was like just that was the main thing that kind of drove you to the school, was the pricing?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I do have so I've been teaching for about 9 years so far. I have been teaching for like quite a long time so far. Like I've taught at like a university. I've taught for places that are more online, these sorts of things. There are contracts I've signed that kind of stop me from perhaps talking too deeply about certain places that are related to that. But you've pretty much mostly said what you needed to say there.
The price.
Yeah. Because like I'm sort of thinking, I'm like I want to have an impact on the world. I want to I'm not going to change the world. I'm not going to save the world from itself. And Lord knows that it sort of probably needs a bit of saving right now. But I'm certainly not going to do that. But like, what can I do that's going to help people out? And like truth be told, like here in Montreal, like we're actually quite lucky because education here, it's not free, but it's also not very expensive. It's kind of in between. It's like, yeah, it's going to cost you some cash to go and like study, but you're not going to like sort of have debts over your head like if you're in the United States there, right? So, but like even then, like I know quite a lot of people who they really want to pick up character art. They really want to break into video games. They're simply not able to do so because they simply cannot afford the cost of the education that they're going to use to be able to like reach that, and to like actually sort of develop actual skills that people need. Like one of the problems we have with like universities too nowadays is that there's a lot of universities that they just don't really they teach things that are certainly very interesting to know, but that won't necessarily get you a job later on. It's like it takes a long time to develop a university program, you will have that program, which will often stay there for like decades. So there's so many programs at like university that are simply don't lead to a lot of jobs afterward, and people don't necessarily always know that. But like 3D art, character art, that's in high demand. It's like I know a lot of people working in video game studios, and the thing I commonly hear is like, yeah, we can't find people. We simply cannot hire enough people for the studio because we can't find people that are good enough to work here. It's not that there's a lack of people applying at studios, but there's a lack of people whose skill is good enough to meet that sort of quality bar that studios are sort of looking for. So on one hand, you have like a huge demand for highly skilled people who do character art, and on the other hand, you have a big pool of people who simply perhaps go to 3D school, but don't quite reach the skill level that they actually need to be able to break into the industry, or are perhaps not even able to do so, to like even get in school to begin with. So that's kind of that's sort of the positioning that the company has. It's to really help those people reach their goals.
Yeah, I think you've kind of touched on a few things, but definitely the one I noticed when I went to university, and my course was 3 years long, but then I did feel they were teaching me things, but then nothing that was industry standard. I think the one bereave we had before we left was they had one student who left and worked in the games industry who had unfortunately been a studio that closed, and then he came back to teach. So he had obviously some semblance of what was, needed to go out and work. I mean, when I went and did a talk the year later, I came back to university to do a talk because I'd been freelancing at that point, and people were also asking questions. I was saying the first question I asked people was, who here knows what ArtStation is? And there was like 2 people put their hand up, and I was like, oh my God, like that's bad. Like people should at least know what ArtStation is, because that is obviously the barometer for the industry. And like it was scary. They went, and these were people who were like 4th years who were like just about to leave, and didn't even really know what ArtStation was. So I was like, oh God, it was frightening. But yeah, I think it is just this whole gap between traditional universities and then online schools trying to fight for students to really see what's the best value. And I think honestly, I mean, no badness to brick and mortars. I know there's a place for it, but I think traditional universities, in my eyes, just can't keep up with the industry and can't keep up with the need and demand for new skills and new softwares. So yeah, I think you're quite right. In regards to that, what do you think are some of the fundamentals or foundations that people miss when it comes specifically to character art? Like, what are the things you see gaps in when people come to you with portfolios?
I think, like one of the common misconceptions I think that students have, or people who are learning this particular field have, is that a common misconception, I think, is that it's all about the software. Like it's all about learning the interface of ZBrush. Okay, how do I use ZBrush? How do I use like all these different softwares? And truth be told, I think and when I learned 3D myself, so about 10 or 15 years ago, there was a certain truth to that, because there were not a lot of software people were using, like mostly, especially the games industry was all focused on 3ds Max back then. There wasn't the sort of like the flurry of software that is now there, so like at least there's still like one sculpting program that pretty much everyone uses, but like outside of that, it's like everyone's all over the place in terms of like 3D software like people use, right? But somehow this and back then too, there was some truth to that, because like people just couldn't find people who even knew these different softwares. So you would get hired if you were, if you knew 3ds Max well enough. Like it was pretty common to try and sort of break into the games industry like that. But I think we've reached a point throughout the years there where I think software for me is less a priority now. It's more a priority to really focus on really great art itself. And that's, I think, a misconception. I think that people still focus too much on understanding software and the technical side of character creation. I mean, and you have to know these things, of course. I'm not saying that it's bad to learn these things, but the problem is that a lot of people focus exclusively on these things, on mastering software and these sorts of things, and not enough students worry more about the artistic implications of what it is that they are doing, because like most people who want to break into the games industry to do character art, but don't actually succeed at it, usually you look at a portfolio, you're like, okay, like the technical side of character creation, but artistically speaking, you still have a lot to improve. And I think that that's also probably a disservice that a lot of brick and mortar schools do when they teach character arts, that they overly focus on the software and they don't focus enough on okay, like these are tools. What kind of great content do you do with these tools afterward? Like really
Yeah.
pushing the artistic quality of art there. Because like truth be told, like I've worked at so many studios now, and I've talked with so many different people. I mean, I've hired people in that position too. It's like, let's say we have a pipeline that's fully Maya based, and you only know 3ds Max or you only know Blender. Who cares? Like, it's fine. Like you'll learn Maya in your first few months working for us. If you're great, if you really have really deep knowledge as far as character art creation is concerned, that is detached from the software, but that is attached to, let's say, the artistic implications of how to create great characters, you have what you need to be able to break into the games industry. And the software itself, it's just a tool. It's a tool that you use to create great art. It's not, as we say, the medium is not the message.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I know what you're saying. It's like, I think it's I just don't think a lot of students put in enough mileage. I mean, I'm guilty of this as well, obviously, but I think it's the fact that they get to a point where they think, okay, like I'm good enough, but then the barometer again isn't where they think it is. Like they leave university thinking like, oh, this is good enough, but then they need to be here, so it's like, there's a point, I mean, Raf Gazzetti said it himself, there's a point you'll get to where the software will disappear and you don't really think about the software anymore. You're just creating, and you create so much eventually that you start to build an artistic taste and style through just the amount of work you put out. So eventually you get to a point, like it says, where like, you're starting to interpret shapes and, textures and patterns differently. And then that's the artistic side taking over, because your technical brain kind of fades away, because there's only so many buttons, only so many brushes. So that goes away at one point, and then all you're left with is the artistic interpretation. Like, well, how does his leg look? How does that function into that? So, yeah, I think that's something I've seen even in some of my 3D work as well over the last couple of years. Is like, as the software gets less and less complex and you know which buttons to push, you're then interpreting more on the actual PC artwork. So, how does your school kind of structure? Do you do a kind of boot camp or one-on-one sessions, or is there like a course that people can follow, or is there all those things? I don't know how it kind of is structured, but
yeah. So far, I mean, first of all, people can actually come and visit my own school, if I can call it that. It's not quite a school yet, but it may become that in the future. At Outgang.studio. That is the website that people can go to if they want to check out, if they want to subscribe, if they want to see the classes that I produce pretty much every week there. And so there isn't, let's say, a defined program throughout the classes, but the classes are arranged in a somewhat logical order. So the idea is that you simply go to the website, you go to the Learn page, and you take a topic in there that you're interested in, and you pretty much go from left to right. So you start from the left, and you simply work your way towards the right there. That's kind of how it goes in terms of complexity. So if people want to learn ZBrush, they can go on the website, they can go to the Learn page, they can check out the ZBrush section, and essentially the first class that's on the left completely is like a very, very gentle introduction to the interface of ZBrush, to all the buttons, all the essential functions you need to be able to sculpt your first sculptures, and then you can simply work your way towards the right throughout the classes until you absorb all of that content there. So that's kind of how it works. There isn't a set program right now, but I at some point that will be something that's nice to put together. But there's a lot to work on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're only in like the very early stages of what you're doing anyway. So, there's still a learning curve for you as well into what's working and what's not, and what people are maybe wanting more of and less of. And so that's also something you have to figure out as you go as well. And this is as far as I know, this is a pay monthly scheme you have, right, as well. It's so much per month to join and then have access to these lessons. Right.
That's right. Yeah. It's $10 per month.
Yeah, which is nothing compared to what a school would charge per month, per semester, per term. So even some of the online schools like like Nomon or CG Master Academy, stuff like that, like those guys, obviously it's a couple hundred or even thousands sometimes depending on the course. So yeah, $10 a month is very affordable, I think. Yeah. And then, but you do some one-to-one stuff, right? People can pay to have like a kind of one-on-one thing as well. Although I think those are full at the moment, right? The people have took up those slots and you're not kind of taking any more at the moment, but those are available at one point.
I do actually have some mentorship spots that are open right now. So people could actually go and they could actually subscribe to that. We're about more or less half sold out. I don't take a lot of mentees at the same time because my time is very limited, unfortunately.
Of course.
And also mentorships are quite a lot more expensive because that is essentially one-on-one time, and being in charge of a company, there's quite a lot I have to do. So essentially, that time is more.
Valuable.
Yeah. So these things cost more, but like at some point, it is also not a bad thing to consider, because like the thing is that I see a lot of people, like there's a lot of people who come to me for the mentorship that are um, they always have all these different misconceptions about their work, and like I mean I'm sure you've sort of experienced that yourself too. It's like when we're sort of very deep in a particular thing that we are sculpting, that we're creating, it's hard to lose the big picture. It's hard to lose the picture, like to take some perspective upon the work that we are doing there. And I see a lot of people who waste so much time focusing on details that will never be seen afterward. Like it's very, very common for us, I think, because like we're so excited about character art, like we get so like wrapped up in like the work that we do in the details. We love to do the details, right? That at some point it's very easy to spend like so many months doing things that ultimately will never actually be seen. It's like how many conversations have I had with people who are overly focused on creating tiny little details somewhere? They're spending days, they're spending weeks, sometimes even months just focusing on like all these tiny little details. And then you talk to them and you sort of ask them the question. So, okay, like, will this be seen in the end? And then they're like, oh, no, I'm just going to put something on top of that. It's like, you're not actually going to see that. Or like, I'm just going to put a screenshot from the front of the character, and like, or like, I'm going to do a turntable that's like sort of zoomed out from like the character, where like all the details that they're sort of working on is just going to look like noise. It's like, there's like, I don't know what it is. And like, I experienced that myself too. Okay. It's like, even after working 12 years in the games industry, I still do that myself too. I have to like physically, sometimes quite literally, pull myself off of my computer, the 3D models that I'm doing, just to have a bit of perspective on what it is that I'm doing, and just be asking myself the hard questions. Laura, is this worth it? Is this time actually valuable to you? Now, I have the benefit of now, like I'm more financially comfortable. So if I spend 3 months working on something that doesn't lead anywhere, I can just say, well, I've learned something, and then that's it. Like it's not the end of the world there. But there are people in a situation where it's like, no, it's like every month that you're not working in the games industry is a month that you could be actually making money during that time. And so in that sort of perspective, I think that if you think about your time, the time that you are wasting on a particular project, and that time, I mean, I don't like the word wasting here. Let me just pull that out, but like the time that you perhaps overly spend on a project that you didn't necessarily need to spend to be able to get a valuable portfolio piece out of that. And that is time that you could actually be working in the games industry. You could be producing a freelance contract. You could be doing something that's going to bring you a whole lot more cash than what the cost of the mentorship is. So in that sense, I think that there is a certain value for the price that the mentorship has. But for sure, it's not for everyone, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think mentorships is like when you get to a point where you're almost about to apply to places and you just need that second set of eyes for people to look over, like, do I have enough stuff? Do I have the right stuff? I'm going to apply to the studio. Do you think these would be good pieces? And then, of course, like, oh, well, I've got these three and I'm going to do a fourth. So I thought, I'll walk through the fourth with you. So yeah, I think that's definitely the stage you want to start talking about mentees, because I think one of the traps I fell in, it was like trying to be a mentee too early on. When people were like, oh, I could probably help you and give you feedback. But then if you're at a stage where you're still learning like fundamentals, essentially, like how to sculpt a hand, how to sculpt an arm, that's stuff that you don't really need particular feedback, because there's so much content online, including your school, that can help with that stuff without you needing to overlook or stand above somebody and be like, left, right. So yeah, like that's probably a good idea. But then it also is, I think, I don't know where, character art for me, you can obviously debunk this because you are a character artist, you've worked in the industry for 12 years. I feel like that's probably, and I don't want to put everybody else's job to shame, because I know everybody's job individually is difficult, but I feel like one of the most essentially hardest to get, because the studios have such small departments when it comes to characters, because you don't need hundreds and thousands of characters, like assets, like buildings and stuff. You only need maybe like 10, 20, 30. So do you feel like it's maybe one of the hardest to achieve in the games industry, or maybe the one that is maybe hardest to get into initially?
I think, like when I think of a character art team, I think of, let's say, like a typical team would be, I don't know, 6 to 10 people or something like that, right?
Right.
And then I
Yeah.
think of people who do rigging, and there's usually like 2 to 3 riggers there. So
Yeah.
character art is not the position that you could do that for which there is the least amount of positions. But the
Right.
thing that is true about character art is that I think that everyone wants to do character art.
Right.
So in
Yeah.
terms of like how many positions there is, like the ratio between the amount of people that wants the job versus the amount of jobs that there are, yeah, that
Right.
ratio is pretty skewed towards like there's a lot of people, unfortunately, that will simply never break in because it's a very highly competitive field, you know. But
Yeah.
I like to wrap that back to what I was saying at the beginning, though. It's like I speak to so many people who tell me, yeah, we have open spots for people to do character art. We're actively just stealing people from like other studios because we really need that manpower on the team, you know. And so you kind of think about it. It's like, why is it that studios have a hard time staffing up if there's also like so many people who want to actually break into the industry itself? Well, it's because of that skill delta between the skill that people usually have when they typically graduate from 3D school and and the skill that people actually look for in the people who are working in the games industry. That skill is very high because, you know, character art, like you're potentially making the thing we are printing on the box of the of the game, you know, like, okay, I know that now people all buy their games digitally and stuff, right? But
They still have covers. Yeah.
yeah, it's like the cover art is often a character of some kind, you know, like it's very prestigious, and I think that sort of that prestigious part of it really attracts people, but it also makes it so that you need to be very skillful to be able to get in that position there. So I think that's really the biggest issue here. It's not that there's too low of a number of spots of character art in the industry itself. It's that the bar is too different between the common skill level of people who want to break into the industry and the level that is actually researched.
Yeah, I think, excellently put. I think that's exactly what I was trying to say, but I couldn't quite find the words. But yeah, like I think it is where, you know, people, there are open positions, but the skill level because it's not like you can get junior character artists, but a junior character artist really isn't a junior character artist. Like it's somebody who's probably done a couple of freelance gigs or at least shipped one title, and then they're walking in a studio. So yeah, like I think it's whereas for environment art, you know, those teams are 200-300 people sometimes in some studios, depending on, you know, the size. But, you know, you need just so many more world builders for that place. So you need, you know, maybe like a team of 40-50 prop artists and environment artists, level designers. So, yeah, I think the character teams, you know, are typically small again because, like you said, you're only going to have so many characters, creatures, and, you know, you don't need hundreds of people. So, but then again, I don't think you should really ever chase something because you've got a fear that you would never really make it because there's only so, you know, you'll find a niche to, you know, you might not get that job at Blizzard or Sony Santa Monica, but then there's like 1,000 other studios who also need character artists. So, and then cinematic teams and indie devs, and, you know, there's always going to be somebody that you'll be able to work for at one point. So yeah, definitely 100%.
Yeah. I think, you know, if I can just add a small thing to that.
Yeah, of course.
Everyone has the power in them to succeed as far as character art is concerned. Everyone has that chance. I don't believe that talent is something that exists. You know, like everything that I think I'm good at today, or things that I've learned that were very hard for me to learn. But the thing that I think made me be able to be successful at pretty much everything I've done that I am successful at, that I've just worked really hard at it. You know. And you have to kind of accept that building skills in a field that is as complex as character art, simply, it takes time. It takes years for most people to be able to reach the skill level that the industry looks for, you know? So truth be told, it's like most people who aren't able to break in, it's not because they're not good enough. It's because you just need to simply give it more time. You need to continue working on your skills, improving your skills. And if you do it for long enough, eventually, yes, you will get your chance.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to individual effort. I mean, it's the old saying, but you will get in what you put, you'll get out what you put in. And, you know, I've seen people who,
absolutely,
you know, 2 people, for example, I know who recently got hired, and one of them went from not being able to sculpt anything to like a year and a half later getting hired. And another guy took nearly 5 years to get a job. But like, it really just comes down to like how many hours you sit in front of that computer and grind away. which should always be done in a healthy environment. You don't want to make yourself sick
Of
or
course.
do too much that you're burning out, and then you don't want to touch a computer ever again, because that's obviously even worse. But yeah, like it will come down to the hours you sit in front of your computer and do work. That's always there's so many people think of shortcuts, but like there is no, in any
There's no
discipline where it's
shortcuts.
drawing, modeling, you just have to put the hours in. I mean, it's you can't get around that at all. So again, with Character Artists, and again with your school, you've built up, and now you run online. You also have the YouTube channel, which is complemented, and also everything that I'm talking about here, I'll make sure that it's down in the description. Laura's links will be there, so you guys can interact with her in any way you want. Of course, we need to make sure you can be found, and people can come to your stuff. Is there anything you would say that I suppose is the quintessential advice you would give people if they wanted to get into character art? I mean, what do you think is like the selling point for, like, what would you say are like the pros and cons to being a character artist? If you could wrap it up in a sentence, I know it's going to be incredibly hard because there's so much to it, but what do you think is if people want to get into character art and you were talking to them, you want to give them a serious talk about the job, what would you say is a reality check to have before you started down that path?
Well, I don't think we have to talk about the pros too much, because if you're like people who succeed at character art, or those who like character art, somehow it speaks to their core, as far as I'm concerned, it's like I like to do environment art too, like once in a while, just for the sake of it. But it was always clear since the beginning. It's like even when I was having my interview at school in 2007, it's like the people there were like, well, okay, so you've done a bit of environment, done a bit of character art. What do you want to do? It's like, I want to do character art. It was always clear to me that this is what I want to do, And like before that, even like I spent a lot of time studying in college, like a whole lot of in medical fields and stuff like that. It's like for me, like there's something about the human body that's always been very interesting to me. That's like always. Like all of my interests, they all kind of revolve around the human body in some kind, or the human mind, or like stuff like that. So for me, it was always just natural, And I think the people who succeed in character art, they're kind of like that. They just know it, really, They just know that it's for them. And I think that's kind of important too, to like really get that motivation to go through and to really go through the years of learning it, because it's going to get hard, like it's going to get hard to like actually learn it, So in terms of pros, well, you get to do what you want to do, and it's a very, very fun field. It's a creative field. It's great. I can't really talk about like how great character art is versus, let's say, environment art, because I haven't done enough of that to really be able to like tell, But I do think that one thing that is true of character art that maybe isn't true for people who do, let's say, environment art is that, well, first of all, you get to do what's on the box art, and that's awesome, first of all. Second of all, one thing that's also really, really cool about doing character art is that you often are more involved with the whole creation steps of a character, Like a few years ago, like it was quite clear to me, I assume it's now the same, but of course I can't speak for all the studios and all of that stuff, but often people who do environment art will probably do either textures, shaders, some will do modeling. Like there's more of you're often less involved in the whole creation step from right after the concepting stage all the way to the integration and the shaders and stuff like that. But most people who do character art are involved in that whole process from beginning to end. So you're a bit more the job itself, I don't want to say that you have more ownership, although it is true, but at the same time, there is such a thing as being overly sort of focusing on that. Like when you work on a team, you have to accept that other people will also sort of come and go on the characters that you do, because you always want to speak to people's strengths and stuff. But at the same time, you often have, at the end of a production, perhaps, you often have something that is more tangible that you can put in your portfolio, say, hey, I've done this from like start to end or something like that, So, and that's kind of interesting. And it's also interesting because it means that the job is a lot more varied, which is also, I think, an advantage. You get to do, every day is often a different day, It's like, perhaps you'll be sculpting something for a few weeks, then afterward you'll be doing retopology for a few days, like a few weeks, then afterward you'll do textures, you'll do shaders, and then you start the process all over again, Like it's very varied as a job, so it never really gets boring, So that's a big advantage. Now, as far as disadvantages are concerned, well, as you rightfully pointed out, sometimes the fact that we do love character art so much does become a problem, because we do. Most people who do character art that I know are workaholics, unfortunately, and that's pretty bad. But unfortunately, that's just how it is, And it is certainly possible to have a nice work-life balance. But first, that is a bit of the dark side of the industry to begin with. There are studios that do exploit their staff. Now, personally speaking, I've never worked at one of these studios. I've always been very, very, very lucky working both at IDOS Montreal and at Guerrilla Games. That I was always working on teams that really put forward the idea that no, it's like you do 40 hours a week, and then like, okay, sure, sometimes there will be overtime, but we really want to minimize the amount of overtime that people have to do. And work with managers that also believed in like, hey, Laura, you've probably been here for like too long. Why don't you go home and why don't you like relax a bit, you know? It's like at some point I working on Deus Ex at some point, and like I really loved this boss that I worked with. By the way, he was one of the best person I had worked with. At some point, we were ramping down, and it was near the end of production. And some of the team, I was the lead back then, so a lot of the team had actually moved on to like different projects. And I was left over there. And at some point I was like, I had spent like 70 hours in like 1 week. That's what my timesheet was like saying. And like, I was actually proud of that. I'm like, hey guys, look, I worked 70 hours. Like, ain't that cool, And then my boss was like, what the hell? What are you doing? Go home. Like, don't actually do that. Like, that's not good for you. So like, I was very lucky with working with a manager there that really put forward,
like
the
work-life balance
health
thing.
Yeah. Like just to make sure that everyone was actually working a very healthy amount there. But there are two things here. One is that yes, there are studios where that's not the case, and you have to watch out, of course, for that. When you are passing an interview, by the way, people don't think about this too much. Interviews go both ways. It's not just them interviewing you, it's also you interviewing them to make sure that you are stepping into a place where work-life balance is respected. But also, there is also something else, which is that we also sometimes need to be safe from ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing I got taught ages ago, and this was before, because I used to be an engineer, so I left that life and then came into art. But someone told me years and years and years ago about one of the best questions to ask during an interview, because people will eventually get to a point where they'll say, do you have any questions for us? And I thought one of the best ones was, what was your favourite thing about working here? Like, what do you love about the studio? And they would have to really sit and be like, oh, I never really thought about that. But yeah, because if it's a good enough studio, they'll probably be like, oh, I love the people I work with, or I love the fact that, we have Taco Fridays, or whatever the hell it is, but then if they really struggle to answer that question, then you're kind of saying to yourself, oh, well, what's happening here? There must be something going on in the background that I'm not really reading. And you can probably notice that as well when you walk through a studio, like into your interview, you look at people, are people kind of talkative? Are they walking about quite merrily, kind of having conversations with people? Is there quite a kind of lively atmosphere? Or is everybody fixed to their desk with their headphones on and like nobody's talking? I mean, sometimes obviously that's just a factor. Like they could be in crunch, or they could be doing something where they need to be working. But yeah, there's definitely red flags you can spot as you're walking into these places. Even the people interviewing you will probably be able to get a sense of what they're like, when you talk to them. But I think it's difficult as well, because when you're so young in the industry, you want to please people so badly. Like you want
That's
to,
right.
Oh, I want a job. You don't want to come off as desperate, because like I've been in interviews where people have been like that, and like I know they're wanting the job, but like at the same time, you don't want to sell your soul for like anything. Like, oh, I'll work here. I don't care. You can pay me like half the money, and you're like, oh God, no. But then again, that comes with me being a bit older in the industry and coming in now when I'm in my 30s. But like, when you're in your 20s and you're really young, you're just like, oh, please give me a job, please, please, please. So, I mean, is there anything you would say would be a guide to how to present yourself at like interviews or engineer positions when you're going for character art, teams? Like, do you think there's a way to kind of put yourself across as the fact that like, I want to work here, but I don't want to be taken advantage of?
This is going to come across very harsh, but I don't think there's much you can do when you're applying for a junior position.
Yeah,
because when you're a junior,
I mean,
you don't have a lot of negotiating power, unfortunately. You more or less have to take the salary they're going to give you, and you more or less have to, but I don't think it's necessarily like, at least for a salary side, it's not that bad. It's like you work a few years, and then you prove yourself, and then afterward you have the power, you have that experience to go and negotiate perhaps somewhere else, like a salary that you think is actually comfortable for like yourself. But honestly, like I hate to say it, but when you're a junior, there's not much you can do. You more or less have to accept what is offered to you, because you simply don't have that power. It's like, unfortunately for most studios, it's like, well, unfortunately, there's a lot of people applying here that have the same degree of experience that you do. So like, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's good, but unfortunately, I think that's
Of
how it
course,
is.
just a fact. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. But when you are essentially going through an interview, it's good to ask questions. Like, okay, what are the core fundamental values at the what are the fundamental values at the core of your studio? Let's say,
yeah.
and like often just asking that question will probably also get you a very broad range of answers that are very interesting. So like.
Yeah.
If you are being interviewed, all right, like when someone at the end of the interview, this is very typical, asks you, "Do you have any questions for us?" Ask questions. You have to ask questions. All right. It is important that you do so, else they will sort of interpret you as being perhaps uninterested by the position there. So do ask questions. What are the core values of the studio? Do you guys have a good work-life balance? How many people, like how many hours on average do people work? These sorts of things. It's a great time for you to interview them and see if like just get a feel for it. Like, okay, is this a proper place to work or not?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even if you can kind of grab a snippet about some particular studios that, maybe their mottos on their website or their core values are something that's really interested you, and you're like, oh, well, I noticed when I was, looking through your website and researching for this role that, this is something you mentioned on the website. And so how does that actually build into your work culture when, with people who work here? And then people will be like, oh, holy shit, like, they've actually paid attention. They've actually looked at the website. Like, they've not just walked in the door and hoped for a job. So, yeah, I think it's one of the trappings, I think, of this industry is that every single studio on the planet, even though there are thousands, tens of thousands of studios, they're all individual. They're all just like people. They have their own morals, their own styles, their own types of games that they work on, strategy, first person shooter, whatever. So every single interview, you really have to prep because, like, even like somewhere like IDOS, right? When you're walking in the doors of there, like, oh, well, story-driven games, typically single player, depending on what they are. So there's values that you've got to try and build up to when you walk into those studios and ask yourself, well, what is important to them and how can I convey that when I'm going to get interviewed? I mean, like, you probably couldn't cast your mind back now because it seems like so long ago, but when you interviewed for IDOS, I mean, what was some of the maybe highlights that were in your interview or things you talked about that you feel you can still remember?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a while. Like that was a while ago. Like you'd have a better chance of getting an interesting answer from me if you asked me about my interview at Guerrilla Games there. But when I was essentially, I still do remember that process really quite well. Like, because like it's the first job that you get into games industry. It's very important. So that does essentially get burned into your memory there a bit more. So let me just go through that history just very briefly here. Essentially, I went to school, right? So I went to school here in Montreal, where is the place where I teach right now, essentially. So the place is called it's called NAD or NAD, which is a somewhat unfortunate name as far as English is concerned, but it is a French school. So here at when I did my 1-year program there, pretty much I was very extremely lucky. I think that, like, honestly, like the stars aligned really well. I think I worked hard. I had a good portfolio in the end, but ultimately also the fact that I broke into the games industry, there was also a big element of luck in there because the stars just aligned in a way that IDOS Montreal, they were looking for a junior. And they're like, okay, so which school is around here? Oh, there is this school there that's called NAD. Why don't I go there and go there? So the lead for the character art team back then came to the school, and they pretty much interviewed all people who did character art right on the spot there. So I mean, truth be told, like it's like that was too big of a moment for me. I was like so like sort of out of it because like everything was so like new and fresh and sort of exciting, and that I didn't really know too much what I said there, but somehow I said the right things. And after that, so I went for a second interview at IDOS Montreal directly. And I think I was the only one that they sort of invited then. They're like, okay, like, I think we really like you. Why don't you come here? And so, I mean, I'm sure that if I had failed that, they would have invited someone else in my stead. But I guess they kind of really knew that they wanted me back then. So I went to the studio directly. I met the art director, which is where that sort of big and very interesting friendship sort of more or less started there. And so he pretty much looked at my stuff, asked me a few questions that really focused on art, and somehow he was convinced that I was the right person. And I got very lucky indeed.
Yeah. I mean, I think people have always told me as well when it comes to art interviews, especially with the industry, that if you get in the building, you're 90% of the way there. Because typically when you do the face-to-face, it's because they've seen your art, they've invited you in, so it's less about your art then, it's more just about, are you a sane human being? Like, could we work with you? for
That is
40
so
hours a
true.
week without
Gordon, yeah.
personal hygiene. Do you have any extreme religious views? Like, you know, because you never know. Like, you don't know people till they walk in the door and talk to you. So, but like, yeah, I think people always think like, oh, I've got this face-to-face interview and I'm still not sure. I'm like, well, if you're at that stage, then yeah, you probably have 90% got the job. It is literally just a litmus test of like, are you a normal human being? So,
Yeah. That is
yeah.
so true. Yeah. That is
Yeah,
essentially
100%.
usually the thing that like people are kind of worried about.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you know, because it's like, would we want to work with you? You know, because like usually the interview process is okay. Like, well, first we'll look through everyone's portfolio and we'll select the people we are already convinced they can do the job just based off their skills, the skills that they're showing through their portfolio. Then, so yeah, a lot of the interview is really just about would we want to work with you? Or are you a good fit on the team or not? You know.
Yeah, definitely. Even recently, I've seen a lot of people actually. It's like a lunch interview now. So you would go for a typical interview in an office, and they would probably be like, "Cool, do you want to go to lunch?" And then you kind of meet the whole team. Then they tend to bring like the character team out with you, and then you sit with them and have a big conversation.
Yeah.
And obviously after that, they would all sit and be like, "Cool, what did you think of XY person? Yeah, they were cool. I'd probably hire them. They'd be fun to hang out with." And then it goes from there. So yeah, it's not as I think the overall theme is like the industry isn't as scary as you think. It's just that it is competitive, it is hard to get in it does require a lot of hard work, but once you break in, and that is the hardest bit, is breaking in, then it kind of just like steamrolls from there. Like it just gets no easier, but opportunities come more frequently. And I think especially within games, because teams change so often, because games have a life cycle, you can work on maybe one game or a couple of years and you do get the opportunity to move up quite quickly if you're proving yourself in your job and you're obviously meeting and hitting your deadlines. So yeah, like don't think that, you know, I do have people who contact me and think that like, oh god, the industry is so scary and it's so intense and oh my god, and like it is a competitive industry, but it's not impossible. Nothing is impossible. Like you work hard enough, you stay dedicated to your craft, you will eventually find work. So yeah. Definitely. So I mean, like, I think that's a good place to end on. And yeah, I know Laura's got things to do anyway, so we'll need to let her go and get on with her day. But if you guys have stuck about to this point, thank you for listening so far. And of course, I said like I'd leave Laura's links below. You can check out her studio and her school, as well as her YouTube channel and any other links that she's going to send me. And yeah, just to say thanks also to Laura for coming on. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks for the invitation. It's been great.
Yeah. To chat. Awesome, man. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, cool. So if you guys have any questions for her or anything at all, you can reach out to her at her channel or school, or leave a comment down below. If you guys are listening on any of the audio versions, so Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, all that kind of stuff, we do a video version where you can see both our lovely faces on YouTube. You can head over there and check us out also and leave us a like. And yeah, up until then, this is pretty much it. If you guys want to keep listening, there's more episodes on the YouTube channel and also through on the other websites. And yeah, we'll speak to you guys later. Thanks to you for listening. Thanks to Laura, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.